If you wanted to get really good at basketball, you probably wouldn't just play full-length matches over and over. You'd probably also do practice like taking shots at the hoop from different angles and different distances. And if you wanted to get better at, say, tennis, you wouldn't just play tennis. You'd also invest some time into practicing the other really important stuff, like your serves. Improving at esports then, and more specifically competitive FPS, is really not that different. I mean, sure, it's not as physically demanding, but it's still got that really critical element of needing to hit your shots. And just as in basketball, soccer, tennis, really any other competitive sport, sometimes those shots are really hard to hit. So that's where aim trainers come in. Games like Kovaaks and AimLab, which give you isolated target practice where you can take shots at the hoop from different angles and different distances. Over the past couple of years, aim trainers have become insanely popular. They now even sponsor massive streamers and collab with huge companies. But do they actually work? Do aim trainers actually improve your aim like they say they do? Should you use them as a warm-up? Should you really focus on improving in them and really climbing the leaderboards? Or maybe should you not use them at all? Now, really quick introduction to aim training for those who don't know what we're talking about here. Basically, you pick whatever type of aiming scenario you want to work on, whether that's click timing or tracking, or close targets versus far away, and then you simply practice it. You work on being as fast, accurate, and efficient as possible, and progressively beating your high score. In Kovaaks, there really is a scenario for everything, and some of them are really damn hard. This is also a really good time to play with some of your settings, different mouse sensitivities, different FOVs, even different monitor distances from your eyes. These are settings that would be really hard to dial in when you're actually playing a game and focusing on everything else. With aim trainers though, it's kind of like an objective benchmark, since you get a score at the end of each run, so finding which mouse you aim better with or which mouse pad you aim better with, it's quite easy to do. I'd even go as far as saying that aim training is kind of addictive. The personal challenge of beating your own high scores, trying to perfect your aim and be as cracked as humanly possible, and knowing that it has carryover to when you actually boot up a game is pretty cool. But does it actually? I mean, if your scores are improving in aim trainers, does that necessarily mean that you'll have better aim when it comes to actual first-person shooters? Well, here's the thing. Even if you became, top 0.1% absolutely insane at aim trainers, you still wouldn't be training some of the most important elements when it comes to good aim in an actual game. Those things being movement, since aim trainers don't really require you to move pretty much at all, and the second one being prediction, since you're not learning stuff like enemy strafe patterns, for example. Aim trainers basically only teach you mouse control, how to micro adjust better, how to focus on targets better, and to a certain point they also sharpen your reactions. And don't get me wrong, mouse control is super important, but that alone isn't what makes really good aim. Learning how to strafe properly and perfecting that synergy between your movement inputs and your mouse, that's something that no aim trainer can really teach you, yet it's hugely important into how clean your aim looks and how many shots you hit. But it's prediction that is probably the most underrated aspect of really good aim, and to be honest, it's just never really talked about. This is stuff like learning enemy strafe patterns, falling speed, if they're running towards cover, for example. I'd also put crosshair placement in this category as well, which, as we know, is hugely important. These are things that you can only really get better at by just simply playing more and more. Think about it for a second. If you know which direction the target is most likely going to move next, aiming becomes so much easier. Honestly, this is probably at least half of what makes really good aim. It's also one of the reasons that if you've ever played an aim trainer, you'll just naturally get better at a specific scenario as you learn the patterns, the movement speed, and stuff like that. Your mouse control might not even improve, but after you've played it a few times, your prediction is improving and you're learning what the target is going to do next. You no longer have to rely on your raw reaction skill. This is also why you'll see players who have amazing tracking and crosshair placement without ever really touching an aim trainer. I mean, sure, their mouse control is pretty damn good, but because they've spent thousands and thousands of hours playing that individual game, they've seen it all, and their prediction is incredibly good. They know what the opponent is most likely going to do next, they know where to place their crosshair, and they have that calmness and confidence which can only be built up over thousands and thousands of hours of game time. This is something that an aim trainer can unfortunately never teach you. And that's not even considering the other things that aim trainers don't teach you, but are super critical in winning 1v1s. These include recoil control, bullet spread, damage fall off. They also don't teach you positioning or map knowledge or things like character abilities, cooldown management, the list goes on and on. There are so many things that you miss out on training and improving when you're just doing isolated aim training. However, I do still think that aim trainers are actually incredibly useful. Firstly for those who are quite a low rank and probably could be working on their mouse control, I don't think that there's anything better than an aim trainer to actually do that. You'll be able to find a sensitivity that's better suited towards you, you'll be able to smooth out all of those jitters and work on being more efficient and accurate, and potentially, also develop faster reactions since you're always in this mode of expecting target movement. Ironically, it's this group of people who would kind of benefit the most from using an aim trainer, and really developing that mouse control could take them up a couple notches, but it's also the group of people who don't really care about gaming enough to download an aim trainer to begin with. But yeah, if you're quite a low rank and you genuinely want to improve, aim training can be a really good tool. I think they're also really good for those who play, pretty intermittently. So for those who take a few days off and then play a few days in a row, aim training can give you a kind of accelerated warm-up that you just wouldn't get from playing the game itself, especially if you're playing primarily battle royale titles where you might only have a handful of gunfights every few minutes. Compare that to an aim trainer where you can simulate hundreds of targets in the same amount of time. If, however, you're already playing at a pretty decent skill level and you play pretty much every day, aim training is honestly probably a waste of time. I would say if you can score the most popular Kovaaks scenarios in the top 5 to 10%, chasing anything higher than that really isn't productive when it comes to ranking up in whatever game you play. Now, top 5%, that sounds pretty high, but again, I'd consider that the point where you're not really getting any further benefit and carryover to actual games. So even if you can get, say, top 15%, that's not bad at all. And that's kind of the point I'm at now. After 300 hours in Kovaaks, I have a bunch of scores in that kind of top 1% range, and the continued carryover that I'm getting for actual games feels less and less, and at the moment, it feels basically next to nothing. It's nice to boot up every now and then, chill to some music and hit some targets, especially if I have a new mouse or mouse pad to test out, but beyond that, I'm not really expecting any benefit from it at all. I do distinctly remember though when I first started playing aim trainers a few years back, it literally felt like a cheat code. This was before aim training became popular, and back then I definitely felt a really steep improvement in my aiming ability and how my reflexes felt. I then descended into this kind of aim training borderline obsession phase where I would try and beat a new high score every single day, and I'd do a minimum of a 30-minute warm-up before playing any actual game. That's something that I just don't recommend. I'll also mention that for warming up before some games, you're much better off playing some deathmatch or warm-up scenarios for that specific game. Overwatch 2, for example, usually has a handful of specific custom maps in rotation if you want some more specific practice, and this is also probably the best type of aim training that you could be doing since you're also training your movement and prediction. The very popular Widow headshot server, for example, there's basically no better warm-up and training if that's the character that you're playing and you want to hit more headshots. Play a few rounds of this, then jump into an actual match. It's pretty insane how dialed in and automatic your aim feels. Same for Valorant and CS, which have their very popular deathmatch servers. In my opinion, these are leaps and bounds beyond what any aim trainer can teach you. As I mentioned though, aim training can be beneficial for those who aren't playing every day or those who aren't playing at a high rank. And so for those people, here are a few tips. The first thing is of course to spend some time dialing in your settings and using the actual FOV and sensitivity that you play with in game, and also to play around with a visual theme that works for you. I'd also recommend a more neutral target color as opposed to a bright yellow or red target, which is usually set at default. I feel like this is more representative of what you'll actually see in game, and it should keep your eyes feeling a bit more fresh. And another important tip is to play the scenarios that you're actually really bad at. I mean, this is kind of the point of training in the first place for any sport. Find what your weaknesses are and then work on those. Personally, I've found the really hard scenarios, the ones that kind of tilt me, to be the ones that give me the most rapid progress and improvement. Stuff with really fast moving targets, smaller targets. My accuracy in these scenarios might be less than 50%, which is honestly pretty bad, but because they're so challenging, they really force 100% of your attention and focus. So if you're spending like an hour playing Tile Frenzy or some slow tracking scenarios, you're simply wasting your time. I know they're cool like flex scenarios, it's cool to get a really high score, but the carryover and kind of translation to actual games here is very small for anyone past a beginner. Back to our basketball analogy in the beginning, that would be like standing right in front of the basketball hoop on a stepladder. So here are a few scenarios in Kovaaks that I'd recommend and the ones that I've seen the most improvement from. Top row here would be pretty comfortable for most people of different skill levels, with the bottom row being a bit more humbling. But yeah, very basic, popular scenarios here. Overall, should make your aiming pretty well rounded and also sharpen those reflexes a bit too. So do aim trainers actually work? I've spoken to a lot of people about aim training. Some people think they don't work. work at all, they're kind of pointless. Other people think they're the ticket to becoming a human aimbot. As usual, the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think a lot of people will see some rapid early improvement from first booting up an aim training and kind of working on those weaknesses, but also understand that the carryover is quite limiting because you're not working on all aspects of your aim, and that after a certain skill level, you'd just be better off playing the game that you want to get better at. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you found this one helpful or interesting. As always, a huge thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.